Hi, all. So today I wanted to dig deeper back into intersectionality. Hamilton really brought up a lot of really curious and interesting points to me that I've had some really interesting discussions with colleagues and friends, and it made me think that maybe a little bit of a deeper dive into it would be helpful. So, what I wanted to start off saying is that although this journey with being anti racist, diversity might be new for a lot of white people, it is also new in a different way to a lot of people of color. So we understand as people of color that we have our own issues within our community, and they stem from racism too. So colorism within our community, classism, a lot of these things also come from systematic racism, and those are things we are dealing with as a community, and those are conversations that are much larger than I could ever cover in this clip. But one of the particular pieces of this that I wanted to cover that is really important to me because it's part of my identity is immigrant community. So I think when a lot of Americans think of immigrants, they think of the Latinx community. They hear dreamers, they think of a particular person. Some of you may know, some of you may not know. You can see my maiden name and figure it out possibly, but I'm first generation American. My dad is Haitian and my mom is Jamaican. They both came to the US in the 50s and 60s, not together. They didn't meet till later in Chicago. I don't know why two warm weather people would move to Chicago, but that's a whole other story. But, they're celebrating their 50th anniversary this year, but they've been together and they raised me in Chicago suburbs. So my experience is really different because the traditions, the history, and my background does not come from the Atlantic slave trade in the Americas. My ancestors went to the Caribbean, and that in itself is complex. But what I find interesting whenever there's these conversations is I always have to assert as a person, whenever there's conversations about Black rights, I always have to assert immigrant rights too. So whenever I'm talking within my community, I always have to say, well, Black people are immigrants too, and kind of find the intersectionality within my own community to assert that right and those and invoke those same sort of challenges that maybe Latinx people or maybe Asian people or Indian people may experience. My dad came to this country and English wasn't his first language. My dad speaks three languages, and he would probably say he speaks Spanish passably as well. So he also had to learn another language, very similar to people from other countries. So that intersectionality kind of cuts both ways, where people of privilege might not see it that way, but also there are people of privilege and within the Black community who don't understand that they're maybe not understand, but aren't readily asserting the rights of immigrant communities. So it's a really deep dive, and I could go into so much more detail, and maybe in the coming days I will, but it just kind of made me think with Hamilton, all the different layers that make people complicated and complex that might not be considered. And I really wanted to touch on that point about intersectionality within specific communities themselves, and how even that community might not be aware of that part of the intersectionality. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts and hear what you have to say.